This is Covering the Spread, part of the FanDuel Podcast Network.
We are inching closer to tee times for the Open Championship at Royal Portrush for this year, and a lot of fun storylines to track are coming our way. Of course, Rory McIlroy in his home country. Scottie Scheffler still the favorite at plus 450. Can Jon Rahm finally come through at 12-1 for this week? Does Bryson DeChambeau do well? Can Xander Schauffele keep the claret jug? We're going to break down all that for today, breaking down our favorite bets at FanDuel Sportsbook for the Open Championship, talking both win bets and non-outrights for this week. Welcome on into Covering the Spread, a FanDuel Research podcast. My name is JimSannes. I am a managing editor for FanDuel Research, joined here as I'm ever by every major, at every major, by Brandon Gdula. Check him out on X at Gdula13. He is on Blue Sky at Gdula. You can check him out at FanDuel.com/research, where he is a senior managing editor. Brandon, happy Open Championship week. How you doing today?
I'm good. I'm excited as always. It's a little bittersweet because it's the last one. It's also bittersweet. You mentioned the claret jug. I wish they'd bring back the challenge belt, but I don't think they're going to do that. So,
enlighten me.
They used to give out a belt to the champion golfer of the year for like.
Really?
Let me see. Yeah. And if anybody's watching, they see my title belts back here, so they know that'd be.
Are you going to get a replica of the challenge belt? It's like an MTV reality show. It is
probably not. The challenge belt was awarded to the winner of the Open Championship in golf from 1860 to 1870. It was replaced by the claret jug for this 1872 Open. What they give?
You're quizzing me on things that occurred for a 10-year stretch in the American Civil War.
Give me one reason why they shouldn't give out a title belt for one major, especially when they can call back to history and say, like, you know what, this is how it used to be. How sick would that be?
Does Rory McIlroy have a belt endorsement deal? Google AI is telling me yes, he has a belt endorsement deal with Nike. And when Rory wins Sunday, I can't mess up Nike's flow. So that's your reason not to do it, is Rory McIlroy has an endorsement deal with Nike. And that's the reasoning for me.
Boy, old Tom Morris and young Tom Morris just had a reign of terror back then. They had the belt forever.
Yeah, but you know.
I mean, come on. Like, that's objectively cool and different. You can still do the claret jug, but you know.
I do like the weird like trophies, not just for golf, but also like other sports that have stuff like this. Like NASCAR, you get a grandfather clock if you win in Martinsville. You get like 6 shooters if you went to Texas, which is kind of weird in 2025, but like, you know, it's interesting and unique. So, you know, I think we can add a title belt, but the claret jug is objectively cool. Maybe it's because I'm from Minnesota and they played for like the little brown jug. So like, you know, I guess I am partial to jugs. That sounds weird.
This isn't anti-jug. It's just pro title belts.
I'm going to move past the jug discussion because I feel like this could get us in trouble, and I'm just going to leave that one there.
Doesn't pro bowling use a title belt?
I have no idea. I have my Pete Weber shoes in my closet, but I did not watch a whole lot. So got to break out the ball, break out the PDW shoes. Maybe I can get you an answer later on. More importantly, though, I'm going to give all the good people listening the answer about who we're going to bet for this Open Championship throughout the show for today. If you listened to the Heat Check yesterday, we broke down our thoughts on our favorite win bets. Some of those guys have moved, so our favorite win bets are now different because they're different odds. We're betting the odds, betting the number, not the golfer. So we're going to take a look at our favorite win bets for this week and non-outrights as well to get you ready to let those bet slips for the Open Championship. But first, a reminder to make sure you're subscribed to Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcasts. We, of course, are here breaking down all the key tentpole events across all the sports, but also NFL and college football just around the corner as well. So search for Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcasts. Hit subscribe if you like what you hear. If it's a 5-star rating and review as well, of course. We did have, as mentioned, a show yesterday breaking down our first thoughts on the Open Championship. Talked a lot of DFS in that show. That's the Heat Check up on the FanDuel Golf Betting YouTube page and the FanDuel Research podcast feeds. If you're going to play some DFS lineups for the Open Championship, check out out that FanDuel Research podcast feed, and of course, right here as well on the FanDuel Golf Betting YouTube page. Leave us a thumbs up. If you're watching YouTube, we appreciate those of you watching there. As always, wind, weather, drama, and history, the British Major delivers it all. And with FanDuel, you can make every round count because right now, all customers get a profit boost every round of this week's Major. Using it on anything from 2 and 3 balls to round leaders, closest to the pin markets, or who you think is going to take the whole thing home. If it's on the board, it is boostable. That's a fun word. FanDuel's got everything you need to bet the majors, from pre-tournament picks to live bets as the leaderboard shifts and legends rise. So don't miss your shot. Download the app and swing for some green on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Must be 21 plus and present in select states. For Kansas, in affiliation with Kansas Star Casino, or 18 plus and present in DC, Kentucky, or Wyoming. Opt-in required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable profit boost tokens. Restrictions apply, including token expiration and max wager amounts. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit fanduel.com/RG. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat Connecticut. Visit MDGamblingHelp.org in Maryland. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelpline.ma.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York. This year's Open Championship, as mentioned, taking place at Royal Portrush, a venue we saw back in 2019. Of course, Rory McIlroy did not make the cut there, but a lot of takeaways from that event that Shane Lowry did wind up winning. Brandon, what should we know about the course before we place our bets for this week?
Yeah, so bit of a different Open Championship setup than what we typically think. It's not like it's completely unrecognizable, but when I think Open Championship, I think wide open fairways, or doesn't matter if you kind of miss fairways, all the same. Big undulating greens where you have these super long lag putts, but realistically, that's not exactly what we're getting at Royal Portrush. Pretty narrow fairways, 27 yards on average, according to the GCSAA website, which is pretty small. Now, I do compare this typically to the Data Golf database, and average PGA Tour fairway width is about 34 yards. So it's maybe not exactly the same measurement, apples to apples, but either way, relatively average, if not smaller, narrower fairways than what we typically get, really, even at like on a regular PGA Tour course, let alone an Open. Additionally, again, I think of like big greens when I think of the Open and links golf, but these are pretty small, 5,400 square feet on average. PGA Tour average is a little over 6,000 square feet. You don't get a lot of official measurements at the Open typically, but the fact that they are smaller than average compared to the Tour does sort of change things a little bit. And I see those two things, sort of narrower fairways, especially with some penalties. Of course, there's the bunkers, the fairway bunkers that you need to avoid. But the issues, if you do miss and like in course, out of bounds, and all that kind of stuff, what I would what I typically think of is, okay, you got to be accurate with the driver, and then also a good iron player if you need to hit tight fairways and small greens. And that is, that's what we talked about yesterday. It's how I'm kind of viewing things, and dug in a little bit more since we talked yesterday. And I think that kind of tracks. Now, we don't have shot length data, so no strokes gained numbers from 2019, but we do have a couple basic stats, and these are somewhat misleading sometimes, but there's really two of the better kind of traditional stats that we have in terms of ball striking is good drive rate and greens in regulation. Greens in regulation, of course, longtime mainstay. We know, what a green in regulation is, but good drive rate, for anyone who doesn't know, it's a fairway hit or a green in regulation when you do miss the fairway. So basically you miss the fairway, but you're still in position well enough to hit the green. So you're basically missing in good spots, or being a good enough iron player to get yourself out of mistakes. So who was hitting fairways and or sort of hitting greens either way last year, or sorry, in 2019 at Royal Portrush? Well, let's take a look at the top five. Shane Lowry won, Tommy Fleetwood runner-up, Tony Finau was third, and then Lee Westwood and Brooks Koepka tied for fourth. So that was the top five. Here are their ranks in good drive rate. T2 T7, T12, T4, and T19. And greens and regulation rate, Shane Lowry first, Tommy 13th, Finau third, Westwood third, Brooks 34th, presumably scrambled and putted well enough. But so basically, who's going to be a precise ball striker? That's always important. But usually at the Open, whenever you dig in and try to find some correlations, it's pretty nebulous. There's not a whole lot of like, well, you have to be great off the tee and you have to be a great wedge player. Like we typically think of the creativity around, these greens, just either putting from off the greens, that kind of stuff. It tends to sort of bleed together. A lot of different golfers can play a lot of different ways. This year, I do think that this is more of a ball striking Open Championship than what we typically get. And just for anybody who's curious about like there's not a lot of people from the PGA Tour who tend to play a lot overseas, play this link style. Just in case you're kind of curious, the last 4 Open Championship winners had played the week prior at the Genesis Scottish Open, or I think it was named slightly differently in 2021 when Morikawa won. But Xander Schauffele won last year at the Open. He was T15 the week prior. Brian Harmon, T12 the week prior. Cam Smith, T10 the week prior. And then Colin Morikawa, kind of notably the outlier, T71, but it was basically the first time he's ever played links golf, and then went ahead and won the Open. So I'm kind of looking for ball strikers who have kind of played well last week. That's not the end-all be-all. There's a name that I like who didn't even play last week, but I do think this is a little bit of a different test. And if it plays completely differently, hand up, that's fine. But I don't think that there's anything wrong with targeting accurate and long drivers who are also, good iron players. And again, if you look back at that top 5 from last year, or I do that all the time, from 2019, leading in, they were just all pretty phenomenal iron players. And so I think that's going to matter a ton this week, and that's going to clearly make sense as I kind of get into my favorite angles for the week.
Now, you alluded to playing the previous week, correlating well with winners who won the Open Championship. Let's talk about a guy who played very well last week. That, of course, is Northern Ireland native Rory McIlroy. I think this is the biggest story entering this week, is the fact that we got Rory playing Northern Ireland, played here back in 2019, again, did not play well, disastrous first hole, got worse from there, missed the cut by 1 stroke. It was a rough go for Rory for sure, but things have also been rough since he won the Masters. Got back at the Genesis Scottish Open, played pretty well the event before that too, had a layoff in between. So it's mixed form for Rory, but looked really good last week. Irons specifically were hot. The putter was good. Didn't do a lot off the tee, which honestly might be a positive. Like the fact that he did well without his superpower. So what's your read on Rory given the mixed form since the Masters?
Yeah, super notable in 2019, of course, with that missed cut. Opened with a quadruple bogey, tons of pressure there. Shot a 79, but bounced back with a 65 in round 2, which was tied for the low round of the day with 3 other names, including a name you're going to hear again. One Xander Schauffele. So just
despite having his driver ruled illegal right before that tournament, you can't play well after that, Rory. It's okay.
Yeah, we're not here for that, but yeah. So Rory, I'm not putting any stock into the missed cut, especially whenever it was so it just didn't have it that first day for potentially a lot of different reasons, but battled back with that 65. And now it's a lot of mixed form, right? Since he won the Masters, it's been a little up and down. It's been mostly up. He did kind of cool off with the irons at the PGA Championship, the RBC Canadian Open, and the US Open. He had lost strokes approach in all 3 of those, which it's like it was the only time all year he's done it. He also lost at the Arnold Palmer, but those were the 4 tournaments in 2025 where he's lost with approach. So pretty atypical. But since then, at the Travelers was positive. Genesis Scottish Open gained over a shot per round once adjusted for field strength in terms of his approach play. And I think that overall, there's not a whole lot of reason to be worried about Rory. The question is the number itself at 7-1. It doesn't leave a whole lot of room for error. And if he plays like he played last week, if he played like he's been playing in 2025 as a whole, great number. You just have to ask yourself if he is playing that well, if it's that bankable, if the pressure of playing in Northern Ireland will affect him. I think that we all assumed Rory was going to, take a deep breath after winning the Masters, play super freed up. I think what we really saw was and he said so much, he said as much, it's not, don't need to practice as much basically because the pressure's off. Now, if you think he's gotten back to it because he wants the God to win, 7-1's a great number. I think if you have any other concerns, you're kind of paying top dollar at 7-1. My model has him lower, but my model also takes in the longer term form. I'm not just saying, hey, let's erase that stuff in between because that doesn't count. I can't do that for everybody, and I also can't guarantee that that's not indicative of his new practice trends. And maybe last week was just great. You mentioned last week the driver wasn't phenomenal. It wasn't that great at the Travelers either. It was good at the U.S. Open. That was kind of the only thing he did well. I mean, he putted well too. And so I think that Rory is really tricky to sort of navigate. He's also kind of really getting, I hate talking about his putting because he is deemed a bad putter by people who don't get the stats basically, but he's a 99th percentile putter from beyond 15 feet this year. He's still above average from within 15 feet, but if a couple of those don't go his way, and he's not completely dialed into the green, 7-1 just too steep. I can't quite get there. I do think he's interesting, but I'm not going to yell at anybody, including you, who I think has interest in Rory. So where are you with Rory, specifically at 7-1?
I'm going to talk about that later on.
Okay.
A little tease.
All right.
We're going to come back to Rory because you said a lot of stuff in there saying if you think that he is at the form he can be, 7-1's a good number. I think it is. So we'll talk about him later. First, though, let's talk about Scottie Scheffler, who is a favorite for this week, obviously. He is a plus 450. Scheffler's form in the Open is good. It's not amazing, which is what we expect from Scottie Scheffler. His best finish in the Open Championship is 7th, finished 8th last week at the Scottish Open. I personally don't want to ding him too much because it's small samples, and I've watched Scottie Scheffler rip my heart out enough times to be nope, I'm not going to doubt this dude. But do you think we should ding him at a links course, or is a breakout for Scheffler on this course type right around the bend?
So you're not the first person I've heard say that Scheffler hasn't it's kind of ho-hum at the Open. I don't see it that way, really. He's got 4 starts at the Open. He's been T8, T21, T23, and T7. So he's been top 25 in all 4 starts. Now, are those current day Scottie Scheffler finishes? I mean, 2 of them are. 2 of them are wow, he must have not kind of had it. But he has gained in all. So we've got ShotLink data for the 3 most recent one of those. He's gained in all 3 tee to green stats in all 3 of those events. So he's a perfect 9 for 9 on the grid. He's lost putting in all 3 of those. And for anybody, again, who's well, that's because he can't putt. Scottie Scheffler's a great putter right now. Way better than you probably think. From within 15 feet on tour this season, he's an 88th percentile putter. So there's more makeable putts. He's making those. He's 26th percentile beyond that. He got flustered on the fescue greens last week a bit. He did lose strokes putting for the first time. I mean, he lost it to Charles Schwab as well. He finished T4, which is crazy, but he's gaining a lot of strokes putting because he's making a lot of putts that he needs to make. Now, the fescue greens bumpier, then he's going to not necessarily have the pure rolls. I understand that. But if you also then throw in his event form at Renaissance Club, which he's played 4 times, he has 8 starts at the Open / the Scottish Open. He's made 7 of those 8 cuts. His miss was in 2022 at the Genesis Scottish Open, and half of those were top 10 finishes. I just don't buy that like he's not a good links player. I don't really understand that. I'm not saying like I'm not like yelling at you. I'm just like I've heard it.
Yeah.
And I kind of reject that like it's a thing. And so if you say that Scottie can play good golf this week, he is understandably the favorite against a pretty stacked field. The problem is there is more variance at the Open. Plus 450 again. I think like with Rory, you're saying if Scottie Scheffler can learn how to putt on fescue greens and doesn't get like flustered at all, he is understandably plus 450. If there's any sort of reason to think otherwise, it's still just like at its peak for me. I can't get there at plus 450, but I just kind of want to dispel the notion that he wasn't playing good golf in these setups. And also just think about what you said, basically, because I think other people hold this thought. His best finish has been just T7 at the Open. He's only played 4 of them, and he's got 4 top 25s in all of them. Like, that's how good he is.
Yeah.
If anything, I understand maybe thinking some of his press conference quotes about, like, what's the you win and you're happy. you win and you're happy for a couple minutes.
Figure out dinner for my kid, like cool, man.
Like if you're like, okay, I don't think he's ready. Like, I don't think he's going to be dialed in and go win. Cause like, I'm sure John Rahm hears that and is probably like going nuts because it's like, I need to beat this guy who's like, what's the point? So if you're like,
imagine the Terminator just being like waxing philosophically as they like choke you out in like a, on IMAX, like, it seems fun.
Yeah. So again, it's the same thing with Rory. Understandably the favorite, just like Rory's understandably the co-favorite, but these numbers don't leave me enough, so I can't get there this week. But it's nothing to do with them. I don't think it's egregious. I don't think the numbers are terrible. They're just past the peak for me.
I think my two things with Scottie are the variance you alluded to, where it is a pretty unpredictable event and stuff like that. And I think the gap between him and Rory is smaller than the odds imply. So I think that Scottie should be the favorite. I think he should be slightly ahead of Rory. But I think it's similar to how I viewed them at Augusta, where, we were talking a lot about how I wanted a head-to-head of Rory and Scottie, and I wanted Rory around like plus 125 or so. Now I thought that'd be appropriate because I thought that the gap between them was a little bit smaller than what the betting odds are implying. I feel very similarly here. So to me, I think it should be Scottie at like 6, Rory 650. I think that's probably where they should settle in. Which means I can't get to Scottie at plus 450, but he does deserve to be the favorite and should be there. And I agree with you where I'm not going to downgrade him much just because he hasn't had success. Like, again, Scottie Scheffler level success on a links course yet. I'm not going to downgrade him much for that. I just think the gap between him and Rory is not that big, and it's a pretty volatile event. That's the two things that push me away from Scottie at plus 450 and potentially push me onto his chief rival for this week. Along that subject, let's talk now about our favorite win bets for this week based on the odds at FanDuel Sportsbook. Again, we did discuss these on the Heat Check yesterday, but I talked about Corey Connors. He was 75-1, then he shortened to 70. He is now 65. So my outrights today are different than what they were yesterday, but I want to hear yours first, Brandon. What are your outrights for the Open Championship based on the current odds?
So I don't have to change mine, but this is actually the golfer who is in a head-to-head on FanDuel Sportsbook against Scottie Scheffler. I don't see a Scottie versus Rory head-to-head. I see a Scottie versus Xander Schauffele head-to-head, and I'm going with Xander Schauffele to go back-to-back to win the Open Championship. Just like I dispelled at least I feel like I dispelled the rumors or notion that like Scottie's not good at link setups. I've heard just enough people say like Xander's not playing good golf right now that I don't see it that way. Like, even if you purely look at the finishes, like maybe I understand it a little bit more, but the underlying data is great. And Xander's been playing really well at major setups. T8 at the Masters, T28 at the PGA, and T12 at the US Open. He was T8 last week at the Genesis Scottish Open, which again is a pretty good indicator of, Open winners. And eventually the Open winners not going to have played well or didn't even play, the week prior. I get that. But it's a good sign for Xander because each of the last 3 Open Championship winners played the week before and were top 15, and that includes Xander last year. Xander's top 15 in approach over the last 3 months, according to Data Golf, and that adjusts for field strength, 15th in strokes gained tee to green, 12th in distance, but 101st in accuracy over the last 6 months, though. And this includes he's been working his way back from injury. He's 7th in approach among this field. Now, the one negative that I have with Xander right now is he's very long off the tee, longer than people probably realize, although I think he's probably gotten his due respect as like a long hitter. His accuracy has dipped. This is his least accurate full PGA Tour season. However, he is not that far below average. And if you go back and look at the golfers who finished top 5 here in 2019 at Royal Portrush, it's a very similar profile to what Xander has, where they were plus in distance, relatively decent in accuracy. So I think that works. And he's also one of the guys who is due for putting regression. Xander, whenever he started to peak and how he stayed so relevant at his peak was he was always a great short game player, and his irons and ball striking really frankly lagged behind the other studs. But he turned himself into a top tier ball striker while maintaining legitimately like top 5, top 10 putting splits, not against the studs, but like against the full PGA Tour. And right now, I think he's due for positive putting regression. He's a 63rd percentile putter on tour this year from within 15 feet and a 3rd percentile putter from beyond that. That to me says he's making those makeable putts, not making the longer putts. Some of that stuff's going to fall his way eventually. And so, I understand. Like, we got Scottie, we got Rory, we got Jon Rahm. Bryson's kind of a different conversation because it's an open setup. But I do think that, again, Scottie at plus 450, Rory at plus 700. Jon Rahm is still interesting to me at plus 1200, but I do think you're kind of at their ceilings, expecting them to be who they've been. I don't think at 25-1, Xander's really fully being considered who he can be. And that's a 2-time major winner, defending champ, and playing a lot better than people probably realize.
I agree with you, which is why I'm going to stick with Xander, who was one of my picks in yesterday's show too. 25-1 to me is a discount from where he could be, given how well he is playing. Again, led the field in approach last week, had a ton of distance off the tee, also was accurate off the tee, and he did gain accuracy at the US Open as well. So you mentioned the accuracy not being there. It has been trending at least the right direction. Will that trend continue? Hard to tell. But again, we're getting a discount here. And like you said, due for that putting regression because we know how good of a putter he is in actuality. And he can sink those long putts. They just haven't gone in yet this year. And it's not like he's been a bad putter without those long putts going in. You look at the past 6 months, he's still been above average relative to a professional golfer, according to Data Golf. He's still been good, but he could be, old school Xander if those long putts start to fall. So Xander Schauffele 25-1 to me is my favorite outright on the board as things currently stand. I think that he is well worth that. Happy back here once again. We've been on him quite a bit recently, and a lot of times you can get fatigued when you bet a guy pretty often and it doesn't come through. I am very much not there yet. I feel like, I don't know, maybe it's just being like stubborn or confirmation biasy, but every time I've bet him, I have felt good. 5-1 to me, a good bet and one that I like. So I'm fully on board with you at that number. I think he's just too good to pass up there.
Agree. If I have one bet, it's going to be Xander.
I agree. Okay. What other outrights are you eyeing this week?
A name who's been playing some good golf, been gaining a lot of strokes with his approach play, 13 straight measured events with positive approach play. Victor Hovland, 30-1 to win the Open Championship. I talked about how I think this is more of a ball striking test than most Open Championships. That's how I'm viewing it. And you can look at his Open history and maybe feel a little underwhelmed, which I kind of, somewhat disagree with, but he did miss the cut last year. Not going to gloss over that. But other than that, he started off T12, T4, and T13 at the Open in his career. And again, we typically think of the Open as needing to be creative, have a good short game. And that's what we think of as like, oh, Victor Hovland, that's not really what he does. But also, as I talked about yesterday on our daily fantasy show a little bit, like Victor Hovland's gaining a lot of, or he's logging a lot of his strokes gain data at different setups than the Open. Now, with that said, he hasn't really been great around the green in these Open setups, but he's been such a good ball striker, and he's one of the few guys who has a combination of distance and accuracy that whenever I hear, oh, it's great to be long whenever possible, but straight whenever you need to be, I think of a couple names, and one of them is Victor Hovland. His approach play is second only to Scottie Scheffler over various time frames, and he was fifth in approach a week ago, and since the start of 2025, again, like just trailing Scottie in terms of iron play. And I don't think it's a screaming discount exactly on like, oh, Victor Hovland, we're overlooking him. He is 30-1. I understand that, but I don't think it's actually accounting for what his true upside is and his course fit for this week. Like, I think that Victor Hovland, it should not surprise us if he goes out and is competitive again at a major. I don't think he's getting enough credit. 30-1 for me, very much of interest for this week. And so he's right in the range too, with a good finish last week on T11 at the Scottish Open, right in that range of like played well last week, great iron player. That's typically what, like, if you want to simplify it, that's a pretty good combo. So Victor Hovland 30-1, I'm there as well this week.
Yeah, I agree with you on Victor too. He's not going to be one of my recommendations, but I did bet him myself at 30-1 earlier on this week. I think that the irons are just too good, frankly, at 30-1. And they've been good for a while. And yeah, the driver for him has not been amazing, but we've seen Victor Hovland be a good driver of the golf ball in the not terribly distant past. We know the talent is there. It was just like, for whatever reason, he changed his swing after he won the FedEx Cup. And it's like, oh, kind of weird. Didn't go well. Once he started to show life, he's one of those guys where you want to buy in. And frankly, at 30-1, you can still buy in and you're not getting him at like peak Hovland price. So, and like, he's not playing peak Hovland either. So like, there's a reason for that, but 30-1 to me, fully understandable. I like that number a lot too. So given how good the iron play is, I did bet him at 30-1 earlier this week too. You teased before the show that there was a third outright that you wanted to add for this. You got Xander 25, Victor 30. I was kind of going through my head who it might be. I have a guess, but I want to get an plus minus gauge from you. Is this person longer than Hovland at 30?
Yes.
Is this person Russell Henley at 65?
No.
Oh, dang it. Is it Jordan Spieth at 60 now?
No, I did bet Spieth, okay, but he's not a recommendation here.
Then those are my two guesses.
So, okay, this will be fun then. Well, I guess it's bad content if I bury the lead. So
no,
I'm going to say,
do it. String me on.
So the last few Open winners, and like I've pulled historical betting odds and how guys have performed relative to that, try to figure out like where are some of the more like highly volatile events. Typically the Open rates out super volatile, but even with that, that's not specifically related to the winners. The last 5 winners, their odds were 11-1, 120, Brian Harman being the outlier there. Cam Smith was 19, Morikawa at 35, and Shane Lowry at 50. So for the last 5, despite all the variance and stuff, pretty reasonable, understandable winners. Right at 50-1, we have a golfer who is accurate off the tee and one of the best iron players in the world. And his name is Sepp Straka.
Mm-hmm.
Sepp Straka. So again, I talked about like the good drive rate and the greens and regulation numbers. Think of Shane Lowry and Tommy Fleetwood, the guys who were 1-2 in 2019 at Royal Portrush. Sepp Straka feels just like that. A guy who can hit the fairways when he needs to, hits the greens, and ideally continues to make some putts. He's a good putter. 77th percentile putter from within 15 feet on tour this season. And Sepp Straka also is one of those guys who just subjectively doesn't really go away whenever he's in contention. Like there are times where you're like, I don't know if anybody's beaten Sepp Straka right now because he's not going to make mistakes. And you think about Shane Lowry, like Shane Lowry kind of did the Brian Harmon thing in 2019 before Brian Harmon did that thing in 2023, where it's like, he's just hitting the middle of the green and two putting and like no one's catching him. Sepp Straka has that ability. That's how good he is. He's 13th in accuracy over the last 6 months, 5th in approach as well. So top 5 in approach play over the last 6 months, which is awesome. He's 9th in total ball striking, which is off the tee plus approach strokes gained. And that's despite ranking 39th in his off the tee play. And that's because he's only 91st in distance. So I'm okay with a little bit of a lack of distance for accuracy because he's not prohibitively short. It's not like he's going to get dusted drive after drive after drive. So I think Sepp Straka has the perfect game for Portrush. His open history, it's kind of minimal, missed cut, but T2 and T22, and also 7th last week at the Genesis Scottish Open. So I think he fits everything I'm looking for. I understand if you're like 50-1, Sepp Straka, maybe a top 10 instead. That's fine. But I like enough with Straka. I like his upside enough. I love his profile enough that I want to get to him at 50-1. He feels like an Open Championship winner. This is probably going to be one of his better chances too.
So I adore Sepp Straka, and I did look into him when I was looking for non-outrights because I'd finished my outright card this morning. And the hang-up that I had, and this might be a stupid hang-up because you can pull a Porque no los dos. The hang-up I had was, why would I bet Sepp Straka at a shorter number than Russell Henley at a longer number when I like Henley a little bit more straight up? And I don't think that's a good argument because they're both really good. And like, they're both kind of checking a lot of the same boxes where like really phenomenal iron players relative to their betting odds. I got hung up on the fact that I could get Henley at a longer number. Again, I don't think that's a good reason because like it's a non-outright. I can do both. But like, that was my main hang up with Sepp Straka. I know you could talk Henley later on, but like, what's the main selling point for you of Straka at 50 over Henley at 65?
Henley's got a long history at the Open, but it's not particularly good. He did finish 5th last year.
Mm-hmm.
But that was so he's played 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 times, 5 missed cuts, 2 top 20s. Everything else was sort of non-competitive. I don't fully buy into that. He finished 5th last year. I think he's golfing his best. But I do feel a little bit different with Henley and Straka when it comes to going out and winning. Like, I know Henley won the Arnold Palmer. He beat Colin Morikawa, who I'm not going to like slight Morikawa necessarily, but I do think that it's going to take a little bit extra when it comes to winning the Open. And I kind of feel like let me put it this way, maybe. I know the numbers are completely different. 50 and 65, that's a big gap. If these two are in the final pairing, who do you think goes out and wins on Sunday?
Wow. As long as Russell Henley finishes top 10, I don't really care too much.
Okay. I hear that. But I think you have to kind of account for that. Straka,
honestly, I feel similarly about both.
Then that's fine.
Henley at the Travelers like didn't really step on the throats kind of the way I would have wanted in that one. Granted, I was tracking from Alaska and couldn't watch. It was just like refreshing the leaderboard. So like maybe I'm off in that, but like I kind of get it. But I do think that Henley can be an assassin too.
I like both. Look, I'm betting both, but I can't recommend everything to everyone because that's not how. Yeah. So I like both. And I hear that if you like Henley so much more than Straka or like them the same and you take the better number, I hear that. But
sure.
I do think that Sepp Straka is tailor-made for this week to succeed. And it's interesting because we see, world's best golfer Joaquin Niemann, Justin Thomas, Patrick Cantlay, TGL champions, can't take that away from them. But it's very similar numbers. I'm going with Sepp Straka over those four, and I'm not really feeling bad about it.
Well, I got excited because like the iron, good iron angle for like longer odds. Look at the guys with like win odds like 50-1 or longer. Like Straka pops up as being very green. Russell Henley, and I was like, oh, who's this guy between them with like really good approach numbers the past 6 months? And it's freaking Patrick Cantlay. And then I got sad and I like closed my spreadsheet. So
yeah,
You want good irons, you can get it with these guys. I will be talking Henley later on. Sounds like you will be too. But you got Straka 50-1. You've got Xander Schauffele 25 and Victor Hovland at 30 as your 3 win bets this week. I also have Xander 25-1. But when we talked in yesterday's show, I alluded to the fact that the number where I would bet Rory McIlroy and like think long and hard about it was 8-1. He's still 7-1 at FanDuel Sportsbook. I actually do think, the more I think about it, that 7-1 is long enough for me to bet Rory McIlroy to win this week, and I'm going to do exactly that. So I want Rory 7-1 to win his home major. He was great from his irons through his putter last week at the Scottish Open. Gained at least 0.68 strokes in all 3 categories, according to Data Golf, that is per round. He did not gain off the tee, but the distance was great. So we saw the same thing happen at the Travelers, and he finished 6th there. And he crushed it off the tee at the US Open despite a middling finish. So if you're concerned about the driver after what happened at the PGA Championship, I think a lot of those concerns have been alleviated based on what he's done the past 3 events. And what he did from his irons through his putting last week was phenomenal. And again, same thing at the Travelers too. You alluded to Rory, talking about how he's been very open about the fact that he's maybe lacks some motivation ever since he finished the career Grand Slam. But motivation will not be an issue this week. In fact, it might be the opposite, where it's too much motivation for him to win. But that push and that drive was good for him last week at the Scottish Open. And honestly, at Augusta, he had so many chances to fold and to give into that pressure, and he didn't. Like, he was, I would say, mentally tough in that one. Maybe the press conference stuff makes you think differently since then, but like, he bounced back from adversity at Augusta to win that one. And I think that proved to him he can do the exact same here at Royal Portrush. The recent data is very good. It says that Rory is pretty much back to his old self. So if you had told me after he won Augusta, hey, Rory is going to enter Royal Portrush off a 2nd place finish in Scotland, and I can get him at 7-1, I'm taking that all day. There's been a lot of weird stuff that's happened between then, but the irons were good last week. Putter was good last week. The driver really good at the US Open. He can put all that together, and 7-1 to me is a good number. So sure, it's a little narrative-y to bet Rory McIlroy Northern Ireland, but I think 7-1 is a good number. So I'm taking Rory McIlroy to win the Open Championship 7-1 for this week. I know you said it's too short of a number. Where's the breaking point for you? Now that we've had more time to play, because I think we both agreed 8-1 was 8-1. You would think about it yesterday. You didn't say you'd bet him at 8-1. You said you'd think about it. Are you holding firm at 8-1 is where you think about it?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. I get it. And I was there yesterday too, but I just again thought about like, ignoring what's happened in between. Maybe that's foolish because it's like impactful, but it's all like very easy to explain. So I'm going to take Rory 7-1. And we've talked a lot of times in the past about like, I'm not going to regret betting Brooks Koepka to win a major. I'm not going to feel like a fool no matter what happens to Rory McIlroy this week if I bet him at 7-1. I don't think. Maybe I will, but like I don't think I'll feel like a fool in that. So my outrights, go ahead.
No, I don't think you can.
Yeah. So my outrights this week: Rory McIlroy 7-1, Xander Schauffele 25. Did bet, as mentioned, Victor Hovland 30. Did bet Corey Connors at 80. He is no longer there, so that one is not as relevant. But those are the 4 outrights I have placed for this week. Let's move now to the non-outrights. I'm going to start things off with you. Where are you seeing value in the non-outright markets at FanDuel Sportsbook?
I'm seeing value on Russell Henley to finish top 10. There is a 30% profit boost on FanDuel Sportsbook for top 10 plus ties for Henley, or for everyone, I guess, specifically. But you make a great point with Sepp Straka and Russell Henley. And as I was comparing their profiles, it's basically the same exact thing across the board. With Straka being a slightly better driver, Henley being a better wedge player, but very, very similar profiles overall. And in total, Henley ranks 22nd in ball striking the last 6 months, and that's despite ranking 125th in distance. He's 16th in accuracy and 12th in approach. So again, very similar profile to Sepp Straka's. Again, going back to the Open, I think that's the biggest hang up for me with Russell Henley. He's missed 5 of 10 cuts in his career, was 5th last year. He's still playing his best golf right now. So like, I do think that that matters. And there's a bit of a different way to go about looking at course history and trying to account for how good were you playing at the time. And with that, maybe I just throw everything else out the window and say, hey, he was 5th last year and he's become a much better golfer in recent years. So I hear that. And that's why I still like him plenty. Now, Henley didn't play last week, which is not super ideal. I'm not so rigid to some sort of arbitrary trends like, well, if you didn't finish 15th or better last week, you can't win this week. I don't do that kind of stuff because it's not really how it works. But the fact that he didn't play last week, a slight bump down for me. But Henley to finish top 10, I think he's got that juice this week. I think it's a great setup for him.
Yeah, plus 430 is where Henley has finished top 10, including ties. But you add on that profit boost at FanDuel Sportsbook as well for that bet. That makes it pretty enticing. Russell Henley was one of my bets too to finish inside the top 10 due to the finishes recently. 5th at last year's Open Championship, 7th at the US Open last year, 10th at this year's US Open. He's a really good player in majors, and a lot of those are not courses that set up well for him given his lack of distance. So I don't want to let a couple bad events this year push me off the scent to the fact that Russell Henley is an extremely good golfer. And I do think that I want to use that profit boost on Henley plus 430 to finish inside the top 10, including ties. I think that's a great way to utilize that boost you can get at FanDuel Sportsbook for the Open Championship. So we're both on Russell Henley this week. We're going inside the top 10 at plus 430. Which other non-outrights are you eyeing for this week?
I settled on another one. Top 20 for one of our guys, Maverick McNeely.
Hey.
So you want to look at past profiles of who finished top 5 here in 2019. Basically, you got to be a positive across the board effectively. And McNeely is, and that includes all 4 strokes gain stats over the last 6 months, plus distance, plus accuracy. So he's got a really good balanced profile. And you want to talk about like being a good major player. He's had a really solid major season. He's made all 3 cuts, did finish in the 30s in all 3 of them. So I understand how that sounds, but he did play last week, finished T22. So now you're also asking him to play a smidge better in with some of these live guys in here. I get that. But overall, he has the right profile. Again, that balanced stats profile across the board, good iron player, good putter. I feel like Maverick McNeely has become just sort of a quiet constant in majors because of his all-around game. And that's hard to overlook for this week for just a top 20. I like Maverick McNeely. I liked a couple other names. I think you're going to talk about one of them. But McNeely was ultimately where I'm settling here for the show.
I was very close to recommending Mav at 20-1, or not 21, at to finish top 20 at 3-1. I actually did bet Mav at 333 to finish inside the top 20. So I think that's a good number too. So I'm very much on Mav. The guy you alluded to is Harris English, 3-1 to finish inside the top 20 for this week. Good performance in majors this year for Harris English. I think like underrated, sneaky good. He was 12th at Augusta, 2nd at the PGA Championship, 59th at the US Open, where he was neutral across the board. No, nothing really bad, but also didn't really pop anywhere. But he's a good iron player, really good iron player who putts the ball well. He's not bad off the tee, and he's balanced. He's not like short, but not long, and he is accurate. And when you put that all together for a guy who is just playing good overall golf, doesn't have a lot of holes in his game, you were looking back at golfers who did well here at Portrush back in 2019, and it was a lot of guys who are well-rounded, who can gain strokes in each category. Harris English is probably one of the longer odds you can get on a guy who fits that type of profile. So he's 3-1 for a top 20. This is in the not including ties market, so dead heats do apply. But Harris English top 20, 3-1, I think that's a quality bet. So I like Harris English top 20 at 3-1. What are your thoughts on English this week?
Almost got there, just talked myself out of it because he doesn't have his caddy, and also his plan B caddy cannot be his caddy because his plan B is Davis Thompson's caddy, and Davis Thompson is in the field now. So English said he's got to get a new plan B, which some people might call a plan C, but I like new plan B better than plan C. I feel like it just feels a little more optimistic.
Maybe he can recruit his dad to be his caddy. His dad's apparently a golf coach at Georgia College. I'm going off the Cal Raleigh narrative from the home run derby last night. Just the daddy caddy. I think we can make this work. So HE, put in the call, get dad across the pond, get him to caddy for you. We got to figure this out, bud, because I would love to cash this top 20 ticket. I got Harris English top 20, 3-1 to go with the Russell Henley top 10, including ties, to get the FanDuel boost at 430. You also have the Russell Henley one at plus 430 and Mad McNeely top 20 with dead heats at 3-1 as your other non-outright for this week. Any final thoughts about Royal Portrush before we close up shop for this week?
A lot of guys can win this week, so keep that in mind. But at the same time, there are 3 to 4 names, I think, playing really, really good golf. I think it's the top 3 plus Xander, who are all very much in consideration for just like a no-brainer kind of like can't regret it. So got to do some talking, like some convincing on someone like Victor Hovland, or Ludwig is kind of trending up as well. But if there's an event, I mean, we just saw JJ Spawn win the US Open, right? Like, if there's an event, if there's a major where this can happen, it's the Open. So that's why I'm okay. Slightly bigger outright card for the week, not necessarily full units on everything, but this is the week for it, where that makes a bit more sense from how I view things.
Just hoping for some fun golf for the entire weekend. Yeah. Hoping we can see good names in contention on Sunday and see a fun finish here at Royal Portrush. That is all we have here for today and this week on Covering the Spread. Again, if you want some thoughts on the DFS side of things, did run through that on yesterday's show. That's on the FanDuel Golf Betting YouTube page, but also the FanDuel Research podcast feed. Go find those. If you are watching YouTube, we appreciate those of you watching there as always. Subscribe to get our golf thoughts every Tuesday, but also leave us a thumbs up to show your appreciation for the show. As always, Brandon, appreciate you swinging by, talking through all 4 majors throughout this year. Hopefully got on a high note. Good luck to you. We'll talk to you again soon.
Good luck. It's always fun.
You can find Brandon on X at Gdula13. He is on Blue Sky at Gdula as well. I am on X and Blue Sky at JimSannes. You can find FanDuel Research on X at FanDuel Research. Big thank you to our YouTube producer, Justin Lane, for his work on the video side of things. Thank you, Justin, as always. And thank you to everyone for tuning in. Good luck to you with your bets for the Open Championship. We'll talk to you once again soon. This has been Covering the Spread, a FanDuel Research podcast.